Will you do the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I guess roll call.
Mr. Tarver?
Present.
Mr. Arnold?
Present.
Mr. Armenteros?
Present.
Ms. Schneider?
Present.
Ms. Colorado?
Present.
Mr. Poole has an excused absence this evening, and Ms. King? Present.
Okay, next up, approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, approval of minutes, August 1st, 2022.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Onwards to unfinished business, so.
Members of the board. Members of the board, Randy Stevenson, Director of Development Services. I would like to take a moment to introduce Garrett, and Garrett, I apologize for getting you last name, our new attorney.
Olson, yes.
Colson.
Olson.
Regardless of what the name tag says, this is not Becky. So he's joining us tonight, and we appreciate that. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You recall last meeting, we talked about regulations on the waterfront and how we could move forward with that into enabling language. And we, in your packet, among other comments from citizens, is a memo from Becky talking about those particular items of what we could do legally and what we could not do legally. And I really, if it pleases the board, I'd like to kind of run down those one by one and get your thoughts on that. And then if we have anything additional, we can certainly bring that up. The intent would be to make a recommendation tonight that that staff can take to the city commission. First of all, we can work up some enabling language to go into it, and then we'll bring it back to you. I apologize, I jumped the gun here. We'll bring that enabling language, that code language, back to you for approval, and then we'll take it to the commission for final approval. You'll bring it to you for a recommendation, take it to the commission for final approval, so that we can get enabling language in the land development code. Specifically, I'm kind of looking at this like I do the short-term rentals. We can write anything we want to, but we need to make sure we can enforce it and how we can enforce it. So please bear that in mind as we move forward, and that may be a large part of your discussion as to how we think we can actually enforce these regulations if we put them in the code, because we really don't want to write anything that we can't or we don't have the resources to enforce. That really doesn't help any of us. So that having been said, I would throw it open to conversations relative or discussions relative to the items that Mr. Tarver identified for us, and that we have a memo from Becky on addressing those things. First one being vessels must display rental company name, phone number, and vessel ID on both sides using a minimum of 6-inch letters, and you can read Becky's response there that vessels, depending on their size, already have to display their registration decal on the port side. Does not appear to be any preemption to doing this. We can certainly do that, especially if they're going to rent these things.
I think the intention
even
was,
jet skis, I believe, have to have this registration on.
well, I think the intention is it was besides the Florida identification company
name.
Name, and it seems that what she's indicating is that wouldn't be an issue. Sounds like,
Yeah.
right? Okay, just making sure it's clear.
And I don't see any preemption, Mr. Tarver, to doing that, so I think we could do that. So they're readily identifiable. Now, if they're being rented from a private residence, or if they're part of a short-term rental, maybe not, but at least we'll know by the registration number where that vehicle belongs.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, thanks, sorry.
And it's your meeting, sir, but I'll take it forward.
Oh, sorry, I thought you,
Yeah.
did you want to go, sorry, did you say did you want to go through the entire list first and then we comment, or did you want to do each one?
It's your meeting, so however you would
Well,
choose to move forward.
since we have an expansive list, maybe we'll just go one by one. So you read it, I offered my comment. Does anyone else have a comment on number 1?
Yeah, I
I'm concerned about enforcement, but even more than that, I'm concerned about the ability of the house renters to be able to get around this by, let's say, not including a boat in their lease, but saying, gee, Lisa, I like you, you're a nice person, you're renting my house, I'm gonna let you use my boat. I'm gonna let you use my boat.
So-
Then what do we do?
So could we, so we're going through this one by one, and that's actually number 8, so could we just, maybe just, we'll stay
Oh, well,
on
that-
topic
I
and,
thought that sort of went to them having to put identification on
Kinda
their boat. It's kinda connected, but, okay, either way.
I mean, well, so in the connection of, you're saying short-term rentals should not have to have,
No,
what you're
I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying, I agree with the statement that was made, that we can spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on this, but not have anything that's enforceable. That's what I'm concerned about, and not have something that there's little traps that, and little ways that people can get around it.
Mr. Chairman, board members, if you remember during our discussions last time, I think we brought up a good point here that we could probably, because we're gonna be registering these short-term rentals, if they include a boat or a jet ski or something, that has to be part of the registration, and my personal thought is it should be subject to an additional fee, wherein they're gonna provide us with the insurance and so forth that we need, and we have to have it in the state. I think there's a state law for that, we'll get to that. But that would give us some ability, but to track it down, they'll have to give us the registration number, decal number, so we would know again where that vessel belongs, and that this particular short-term rental is also renting out a pontoon boat or a jet ski. So if those are involved in any accidents or anything like that, then we would be able to enforce that, I would think. But that was part of a discussion we had last time, and I certainly think it would be a good idea to include that as part of the rental, of the vacation rental. And maybe just, we can modify our application. Are there any boats or water vessels associated with this particular short-term rental? I think it is a tremendous liability for the owner, but if I keep moving, I'm gonna run over Christie with this thing, it moves. But I think that's something we need to do. I don't think we can prevent it, but I think we need to put in place some.
But if we make it difficult by
Right.
including it in the regulations that we have.
And charging a fee for
That
it.
maybe it'll discourage somebody who would have included a boat from including a boat.
Right.
okay.
Mr. Carter, if I could suggest, I do agree that a lot of these are interrelated, and maybe it's better if we just go through the whole list and then just discuss them as a whole, because I think there's some relationship between some of those numbers.
Okay, I just think it might start going in all different tangents, but.
It's gonna go that way anyway.
Okay, let's go through the entire list, and then what I'll do is then, I'll go, in for then, so just so we have some structure, if you guys could think, I'll go in the order of the board members, so so at the end, we'll start with Lenny, and then, I'll go last, but we'll just go down the list, then we have some type of, structure to our comments. So, go ahead, let's go through the list.
Okay. We ready for number 2? We
Yes,
have
sir.
any more comments on number 1? Number 2, vessel must carry liability insurance with a carrier having offices in the United States. Florida Statute 327.542 already requires insurance for livery or rental vessels from insurance companies licensed in Florida. I think requiring additional insurance might be problematic. So I would assume if they're registered vehicles, they already have to have that insurance in the state of Florida. I don't know that there's a restriction from us asking where it's insured on the application, maybe not requiring additional insurance, but maybe asking where it's insured.
Yeah, that's correct. We're absolutely allowed to ask who their carrier is, but under Florida statutes, it does provide specific coverage limits. It looks like it's $500,000 per person and $1 million per event. So to go beyond that would arguably to try to supersede what the legislature's already put forth.
Yes.
That's where I think Becky's coming from, and there might be some issues in requiring additional insurance on top of that.
Yeah, I think it was just the conversation with Becky wasn't really requiring more insurance. It's just that the insurance company be based in the United States, because apparently in the Panhandle, they've had some companies use foreign insurance companies, which then
understood.
makes it almost impossible without hiring very expensive. But maybe is that what you'd say is the same situation? You can't require a US-based insurance carrier?
Yeah, I think that's where Becky's coming
Fair
from.
enough.
Yeah.
Since
Okay.
this element of the rental is going to be off premises, should we and could we try to get the city as additional insured in the policy? Because now you're taking it, it's not just the property itself, you're taking an element of that property and you're putting it with other boats, other people. Should we?
I would have to look into that, but my gut would tell me that we would not be able to do that. Yeah.
And we shouldn't? Or we just would not be able to?
I think there could be arguments either way of whether we should do it or not, but whether or not we could do it, I'd have to look into that more with Becky, but my gut would tell me right now that we wouldn't be permitted to do that.
If I can ask, Garrett, are we okay, Florida statute, that again, am I wrong, that requires the insurance company to not just be in the United States, but be in Florida, licensed in Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's what Becky was saying in her letter, her memo.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Exactly.
Okay, carry on.
Number 3, rental operators must submit vessel registration, vessel ID, and insurance information on an annual basis to City Hall. I think we could do this for rental companies, and we also re-register on an annual basis any short-term rentals, so that would be a part of that annual registration as well, I would think.
Okay. Okay, I think we're just gonna go through the list.
Okay.
Yeah, just go ahead and ratchet right on.
Gotcha,
through.
okay. Each vessel must have a waterproof chart showing the channels, no wake zones for canals under the city's jurisdiction, and basically, I don't have a problem with that. I know if I'm in I went overseas the first time, I had the Michelin Green Book, and it helped greatly, the little books that they put out, so I don't have a problem with this, and I think it doesn't appear that Becky does either, requiring that to be on the boats. Rental operations are only permitted from sun up to sundown 7 days a week. Again, that's something that we don't see any legal parameters for not doing. Obviously, I'm not a boat owner or an operator, but I know as a pilot, it's a lot different operating at night than it is in the day. I've got to assume that's the same on the water, whether you're in the water or the air. So we could look to do that. Jet ski and air-cooled two-stroke engines are prohibited. We could probably, and according to Becky's, we could prohibit it. Don't know how we would enforce it. Right now, you can't rent those just to the general public unless you're involved with a hotel of 50 units or more. Same for rental cars. I think what we're talking about are businesses such as was being proposed at 129 Manatee. Everybody's familiar with that, where you have to have a business to rent these things, and how do you and so forth.
And the Airbnbs.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would think we would probably, if we choose to go forward on that, we're going to have to see how we can enforce that. Again, going back to my initial conversation, I don't want to write something that we can't enforce,
Right.
but I would agree with it, and there have to be some parameters, because what we had last time was, I'm from, El Centro, Ohio, and I haven't been to the ocean or water. I don't live on the lake, but I want to rent a jet ski. And I thought it was funny because I watched some people go out there, and the first thing they do when they get to a turn is they take off the throttle, and the jet ski just goes boom. So having them out on the water, and even in our canals, we talked about this before. Unlicensed or inexperienced operators, there's a lot of money sitting behind people's houses on these canals in terms of waterfront structures, boats, and vessels of their own. So I would think we would want to take a look into something like that. Certainly, we would have to address that on a short-term rental basis, but if it's a business, we have a better handle on it, and they're going to have to regulate it. That's why you see the last ones that came before you said no one's going to operate these vessels except either under the direct, either captain or somebody in a group with a Coast Guard registered captain out there. So,
Okay.
okay.
Sounds good.
Picking up and dropping off passengers or delivering rental boats to any city-managed boat ramp is prohibited. If you look at our current Code of Ordinances 6.5-31, which I think I have a copy of. I saw it. I do. I just have to find it. I think we've already taken care of that one.
Okay.
I think that is already prohibited pursuant to that Code of Ordinances. And so that one should be in good shape.
Okay.
And Christie went to the trouble to print me one, and I obviously 6.5-31, currently, the activity of launching, landing, or mooring of any boat, canoe, kayak, or other marine vessel is prohibited from or in any park except as authorized by other provisions of this code or in areas authorized by resolution of the city commission. So we have that language currently on the books.
Okay.
Vessel operations are prohibited from canal front homes, vacation rental properties zoned for residential. And again, Becky responded, I think we could do this. We might run into some Burt Harris claims. I think part of our initial discussion when it's a short-term rental is we register that vehicle as being part of the a la carte menu, if you will, for a short-term rental, and we get the proper insurance and registration for that vessel at that point in time. But again, I would defer to discussion through this board as to how we want to make a final recommendation for enabling language there.
Maybe we could just ask the city attorney real quick to clarify what she means by, I mean, she says, I think that we could do this, which she says on most things, but then we might. So is we might like a 1%, a 5%, or 95% chance? Like, what does that mean?
It would really depend on figuring out how many short-term rentals currently within the city, or any property owner, really, any business owner who has any entitlement to this activity would be adversely affected by us regulating this. So when she says we might run into some Burt Harris claims, it is essentially how many companies, how many small short-term rental folks are out there who could do this activity, who price it into the value of their property, and then how does our regulation affect that? Because if our regulation goes so far to take away some value of or use in their property that's not a taking, then they can initiate a Burt Harris action.
Can we offer a grandfather clause for current?
We could, yeah.
And would that alleviate that issue then?
I believe it would, yes.
Is there a time, can we put a time frame on the grandfather clause, or is it just in perpetuity?
I believe you could. I don't know if you would want to. You'd probably want to get into that more with Becky. She has eminently more experience in this area than I do. But yeah, that's certainly something you could do, and you can grandfather uses in before prohibiting them. But I think what Becky's saying here is, you know, do those entities, do those individuals even exist now? So I think she's just noting it, you know, she's just kind of flagging it now initially, but
Yeah.
I think by saying that, you know,
Okay,
it's
because I know
probably,
anecdotally, we do know there's very few, I would say, at this point, but we're trying to get ahead of it, because like, we used to have very few vacation rentals,
Mhm.
and now we have over 1,100.
It's the same analysis. So before, and you know, now that, you know, obviously everything this board does and the city does is public, so folks may try to get in before, you know, the bell, so to speak. But I think Becky, by saying this, I don't want to speak for her, but probably sees minimal, you know, risk there. Yeah.
Okay.
And just from my standpoint, again, I go back to enforceability. If we have some that can and some that can't, because some are grandfathered and some are not, it just creates that, it muddies the waters, no pun intended, as far as enforcement goes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, fair enough.
okay.
And
What fees can be charged to register vessels, and if there can be escalating fines for rental company operators who consistently violate the rules? And I think the gist of Becky's comment is we can build the fee for registration into the registration of short-term rental, but it has to be a cost allocation method. In other words, how much does it cost us? That's the fee. When we get to the fines, we have a lot more leeway to
Yes.
make those fines punitive, especially for repeat offenders on that. So we would definitely want to register, if we registered vessels, it would be an additional fee on the short-term rental, whether it's a pontoon boat or 2 jet skis, or I'm not as concerned about non-motorized vessels, you know, paddle boards and boats and things like that, but I think we're really talking about the jet skis, the
We're talking
pontoon
motorized
boats,
vessels.
and those types of things, the motorized.
We're talking about motorized, yeah.
Right,
There's nothing
exactly.
about canoes or kayaks or anything,
Right.
subs,
Yeah.
none of that.
So
Okay.
we would look to put something together like that in terms of additional registration fees. And we already have a fee schedule for the short-term rentals that is going before the city commission on Thursday night. So we could add these fees in as we develop the enabling language for the short-term rentals. And we'll have to bring that language back to this body anyway for you guys to respond before we make a recommendation to the city commission.
that fee, of course, would cover the cost of hiring somebody or somebodies to enforce it.
To enforce it, well, right.
You know, like if the city had to hire one or two people specifically to do this, and maybe even get a small boat, that's considered a cost.
Mhm. That's part of that cost allocation, the burden labor rate, how long we think they're gonna spend on it, any equipment that they may have. That would go into the burden labor rate, for calculation of the, registration fees.
Okay. So real quick, do I ask for public comment first before board comments, or board comments and then public comment? Is there,
I'd probably ask first.
ask for, okay. So before we speak, guys, let's hear from the, public. So, gentlemen, do either of you have any comments or you'd like to make?
I just have a question of Jim Torpy.
I think you gotta come over here to the microphone, make it official.
Thank you. Just a quick question, actually.
We just need your name, we need your name and address, sorry.
Sorry.
We gotta have your name and address
Oh,
first.
Jim Torpy, 190 Pinellas Lane, Cocoa Beach. Just a quick question. Why is it worded, always worded in the canals as opposed to in the lagoon and the canals?
Because the canals fall under city's jurisdiction, but when you talk about the lagoon, that's the state. So it's only in the canals we can regulate that are within the jurisdiction of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no other comments, let's, Lenny, you wanna go first?
Yeah, as I've read through this, you know, I live on a canal. I'm all for this. I still see an enforcement nightmare, and potentially even citizens being harassed with this as a hammer instead of and that's my biggest concern is how do we prevent somebody from saying, well, I don't like that guy down the street, so every time he takes his boat out, I'm gonna call and say, hey, there's a short-term rental boat going out. Then we've got to go investigate that and determine, no, it's not. That's my concern. But again, I'm not opposed to this. I just think we got to be careful and think about it and make sure that whatever we do is enforceable and not overly burdensome to the citizens of Cocoa Beach.
Okay. Any comments?
Yeah, so, first of all, the easy ones. There were, in the original question list that you put together and in the way that Becky wrote the opinion letter, it mentions the jet ski prohibition. A lot of owners, residents have jet skis. I think it would be a bridge too far if we try to ban jet skis entirely from the canals, especially for owners. So I want to make clear, at least my opinion, you know, everyone else feel free to vocalize yours. This should be for the rental portion, not for owners who have jet skis. That's not something we should really.
I don't think we're gonna regulate ownership, private ownership.
Okay, that's fine.
It's only for the commercial purposes of renting.
Great, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that, because it didn't say anything about just for rentals there, so.
Yeah, the context of the whole thing is rental vessels.
Okay.
Vessels that are rented by individuals out to other individuals for some type of fee.
Right, I just want to make sure that, because that was a little ambiguous, and in a lot of the public comments that came in on email,
Yeah, there was.
there was a lot of comments about jet skis. I know people have some very strong feelings about jet skis.
Mhm.
I have my own personal feelings about jet skis, but I think regulating these wouldn't be a great idea.
Yeah, it's really from, I can add some clarity. So what you're hearing about is because when Wildlife Water Sports was operating, they operated jet ski rentals, and literally they were going across the flats at 40, 50 miles an hour, all day long.
I-
So
I
that's
would-
just the background, why you're probably seeing those comments.
We looked at the comments coming in, and I would agree with Mr. Armenteros that a lot of the comments were based primarily upon not necessarily these regulations, but more along the lines of what we went through with 129 Manatee. So
Mhm.
I would agree with you, sir.
So, in a broader sense, and under the concern of that Margaret expressed, that maybe someone could sort of try to get between the lines here and say, well, I'm not renting my boat, I'm just renting my property. I'm not sure what we can do about this in the language, and obviously this is up for the attorneys to figure out. But you know, if I were to buy a property in the city of Cocoa Beach and want to rent boats from that property, I would have to have a commercial business license for that property, right? And the city of Cocoa Beach can then have all sorts of regulations related to that boat rental business at that point. in
Like
time.
these.
Right.
Yeah.
So, can we not treat the rental of a boat from the back of a house the same way?
Well, I can, it depends. If you're renting your boat out to your friend, let's say for the afternoon to take it out, we can't prohibit that kind of activity. But in the specific language in the statute says if you rent or give your boat or personal watercraft for any amount of time to someone you know, that sort of activity can't be regulated.
Sure.
But I think, and this is where the short-term rentals come into play, obviously someone renting their residence out to someone on, you know, Airbnb or Vrbo doesn't know that individual, so that kind of transaction is still within something we can regulate. It's not specifically prohibited by Florida statutes, and it's not preempted by the legislature.
So related to that, and to cover, and this would cover a whole bunch of other points in here, like the whole maps thing and
Sure.
and such.
Yeah.
If I'm operating a rental business, can we not require that business to maintain a log of everyone they rent to?
I believe that's something we can enforce. Yeah.
And then as part of that log, the person doing the rental would have to sign an acknowledgement form saying, I received the map. I received basic instructions saying, these are the wake zones in the city of Cocoa Beach, and the manatee zones and all those other things. And for every one of those, they are required to maintain that log and that acknowledgement form. And the city inspectors, whoever is tasked with supervising this, checking the once-a-year registration, and once a year they have to check the logs and things like that people are maintaining these logs to make sure that they are properly, one other thing on here, the safety equipment. Well, the Coast Guard has its own list of safety equipment. We don't necessarily need to go over and above that.
No.
However, as part of the annual inspection of the boat rental facility in the house, we can say, okay, we've inspected the boat, it has the safety equipment, we've checked the insurance, the person doing the renting has provided the log and the acknowledgements, the instruction acknowledgements for that sort of stuff as part of the business, and that would cover a whole bunch of items on here.
Yeah, without going to every, because I think those are all fabulous ideas for the enforcement mechanisms we're talking about. Without going to each one, they all sound like they would work within the context we're talking about,
Okay.
but it would only apply to those boat, personal watercraft, rental establishments within the city.
Sure, absolutely.
So,
Yeah. And I had a note on here, and I know it's been brought up.
Could you write those down on your paper so I can add it to when I turn it into the city? Those
Okay.
additional ideas,
Yep,
if you just document it for me, thanks.
Okay. They are in my hand, shorthand, but I'll do it so that other humans can read it. And to that last point you made, yes, everything we're talking about here are regulations the city of Cocoa Beach would enact for people renting vessels from within Cocoa Beach. Obviously, we can't make that apply to someone in Merritt Island doing that.
no.
So, but we can't fix everything, right? We're not gonna fix everything. If this takes care of 80% of the problem, then that's a big win in my opinion. And I also think Ms. Schneider also brought up how much can we charge for this to cover the cost of us enforcing this? When really, enforcement is not necessarily the police running around in boats pulling people over all the time. It's really someone checking that anyone renting the boat is following the rules. So really, it's the annual registration and everything that I just mentioned. So whatever that costs, we can pass that on to as part of the registration. If someone chooses to engage in this business, right?
I believe and this may be that the covering the cost of enforcement, I mean, the way that the city would go about enforcing any particular violation would be through its normal code enforcement processes.
Right.
And then I can hopefully in a minute when it comes up alleviate the evidentiary concerns and how can we sift through what's enforced and not. But I believe that's already budgeted for, and if there's any increased need for code enforcement folks.
Well, again, we're talking about revenue here, but remember, we are limited in how we set fees for registration, and if everything goes smooth, we're great. When we get to fines, which is more along the lines of what you're talking about, when people are not obeying the law, then we can make them punitive, in my opinion.
Right.
And you have
And
the ability
also,
to
when we have a short-term rental, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, part of their BTR, they have to get a business tax receipt, would state that they're also leasing, watercraft as part of this short-term rental. And and that would be an additional fee, for registration up front.
Okay.
And if it offers any clarity, the kinds of fines we could impose, you know, in code enforcement, there's two avenues you can go. You can go the citation route, which is you issue a citation for every day that the violation occurs. It can be up to $500. That's capped by Florida statutes, but it's per occurrence. The code enforcement mechanism under Chapter 162 works very differently. That is more applicable to when you have an ongoing violation. So let's say we have someone who rents a personal watercraft, who doesn't go through the required checklist for someone, something happens on the water, we issue a citation, it's a one-time issue, it can be up to $500. It requires appearance in county court if they contest it. You could also bring it before the special magistrate, but most cities bring it before the county court, which is in and of itself punitive, you go before a judge, that, it's not great. In Chapter 162, if there's an ongoing violation, such as someone is not keeping the records for some period of time, or we've requested information and they haven't given it to us as a matter of whatever they've agreed to under their BTR or whatever code regulations we have, that's a per day fine until they come into compliance. And under that situation, first-time offenders, I think the limit is $250 a day. Repeat offenders, it's up to $500 a day. There's a third avenue under Chapter 162, and I know this is all a little detailed, but this is how we enforce it. There's a third avenue, which is if it's an irreparable harm. You can go to the special magistrate. It is up to a $5,000 violation per occurrence. And it can be a first offense, second offense, it doesn't matter. So if the idea is, how can we enforce this to where folks just don't price in the non-compliance that they figure is going to happen, well, there are ways to do that.
Okay.
And if I might, a little bit along what Garrett was saying, one of the things we tackled and had to consider when we were doing short-term rental fees is which ones are citation-based and going to the renter, at what point in time, and which ones go to the owner of the short-term rental
Yes.
for repeat offending and not following the regulations and not providing the required information. So we'll take a look at that as well, because that speaks directly to enforcement and where do we need to put the fine.
Okay.
And just final thought. So really, in my mind, most of the enforcement aspect of this would be really with the business registration and the code enforcement part of it. Obviously, if someone is running a boat or a jet ski at full speed through a canal or on the flats or something, none of this is needed. The
That's a
Cocoa Beach
criminal.
Police Department can already, that's in violation of a no-wake zone, or a posted no-wake zone. There's nothing stopping the Cocoa Beach Police Department from stopping them over,
No.
other than personnel and manpower to go police that, which is always a problem.
Right.
That's
And
great.
we have a brand new boat.
So we have a lot of canals.
Yeah.
We have a lot of that. So, and that's it, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, I just had a couple things. One's a clarification. On the number 7 item, picking up or dropping off passengers to any city-managed boat ramp is prohibited. Is that,
I think
For
you just
any
said it's already
business?
taken care of.
it is, I mean, that's for businesses, personal, anything? Anybody can, that applies to a business as well? And the reason I'm asking this is I thought in the code, there are areas and sub-districts, like the gateway
And
sub-districts,
again,
where you can use for motorized vessels, public, if you have a special
Yeah.
exemption.
And this is, again, it's section 6.5-31 of the Code of Ordinances, and it's specifically launching, landing, or mooring of any boat, canoe, kayak, or other marine vessel is prohibited from any park, so city-controlled property, like right here, or Ramp Road, or, to use any of the parks on the ocean, anything like that. Because we've had some requests for businesses that actually wanted to do jet skis off the beach.
Yeah.
So that would be for city-owned properties. When we get into private properties, we're either talking short-term rentals or commercial sites for businesses, which we can also regulate along those lines. Anything else beyond that, I think unless I'm missing something, is gonna be an illegal activity. So-
Yeah, and I think just to add, well, the reason why that was driven, I think that was in there is because the Wildlife Water Sports transferred his operations to Bicentennial Park, and I thought we were not sure what could be done. But now we are sure that should Wildlife Water Sports Part 2 move into one of our parks, we could stop them from operating rentals out.
I would, again, defer to legal. Again, Bicentennial Park, although we have a contract for certain activities and certain construction within that park, is actually owned by the Florida Department of Transportation. It's not a city-owned park. So there's a little bit of fuzziness there, but we can certainly look at that later. Yeah, I think they're coming from Merritt Island, where they're based, and picking up passengers in Bicentennial Park. Now, please understand, if we were to do that, we're also gonna have to prohibit all of the parasails out there, and that's a popular place.
So we can't limit to motorized vessels.
I think I'd have to check, but I don't know whether that would be discriminatory or not, but I would think it might be on the borderline.
Yeah.
To prohibit, you can't have boats here, but we'll let you come out here and park and unpack your kites and go kite surfing. So I'd have to look, I don't know.
Yeah, and I would differentiate the one factual scenario you brought up of the prior business that was using the park as their base of operation versus, dropping off a client at their preferred destination, I think enforcement becomes very difficult there. But if someone's permanently mooring boats or basing their operation out of, a public boat ramp, I think that's factually different than,
Well, I mean, what you're
Could
saying, technically Ramp Road, we could have boat rental operations out of Ramp Road because we have kayak rentals. So we
No.
could right?
Not in my opinion. We might be able to differentiate that, if we go back to Bicentennial Park real quick, we might be able to draw the line at motorized vessels there on that one as well. And make it, I'm trying to make it as clear and as definitive as we can for enforcement purposes.
Understood. I'm sorry for taking your time. Go
No,
ahead. Please proceed.
it's part of the conversation, because I think that there was already a way through a special exemption to allow motorized vehicles out of some facilities, boat launch facilities
Well, as you
now.
recall what we just went through with 129, the second version of 129 Manatee, it was a special exception. We had at least 2 public hearings, not even public hearings, public meetings where we had the owners there, they're addressing the concerns of the citizenry. That would be that same process if we had a commercial entity that wanted to come in on a piece of private property, a piece of commercial property, and do that.
So this isn't intended to eliminate this
No.
process
It
of
wouldn't,
still asking for it
No.
in the gateway subdistricts.
Right. They can
still
already
do that,
it.
go through the process.
Yeah, I think it's vessels less than 20 feet in length, and there are already some stipulations beyond which if they go, they have to get a special exception.
Okay, I just wanna make sure we're not trying to eliminate that.
No, we wanna
And
leave those in.
leave that in there.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking to touch those, we wanna leave those, because they worked fairly good for us last time. We're trying to address some things that heretofore may not be addressed in our code, specifically with the increasing population of short-term rentals, and a lot of them being on the waterfront.
It really is not getting, like short-term rentals only a few years ago was like not even an issue, and
No,
so,
they're everywhere.
yeah, so I think
They're not
really the
regulated.
intention is like we're trying to, because we're already seeing this happening a little bit. I can imagine
Get in front of it.
in 5 years, we're like, now we have 1,200 boat rentals operating out of the residential. I mean, no one thought Airbnbs would be as big as it is, but
Just as a point of reference,
Yeah.
in 3 years ago, or 2019 or 2018, we had a little under 700 vacation rentals. Now we're up to about 1,200.
yeah.
And more of those, unfortunately, with state law passed, are in the single-family residential district.
And my only other real comment is to agree with you that it really it hangs on the registration process and identifying what specifically it applies to. It's jet skis, is it the foil things where they rise up and, I
That's
don't
new,
know.
that's
That's new, and I
A lot of
mean,
that-
it's like, what is it exactly
There's
are
2
we?
people now on the river that have those.
I'm just, I just wonder, we just need to hone in on the specific things that we're trying
The state
to.
defines what a motorized vessel is,
Yeah.
if I understand. The state has, correct? The state defines what is a motorized vessel.
It's,
So that's what we're regulating is motorized vessels as
And I
the
probably
state.
shouldn't say this, but I'm waiting on
Rent-
somebody to come out and hook up to a fire hydrant and run one of those things that attach to your feet and they blow
Yeah,
water
they
in
blow
your
water, you
flip
fly,
Mhm.
just
So,
things are
and
moving,
then, you know,
things coming in.
So,
And then,
we have to be flexible because this industry is changing by the day, apparently.
and just thinking ahead towards the enforcement part, maybe one thing, I don't know if this is possible, but when they register, saying it's gonna be used as a rental, just say if there's a way to require them to put on like a, highly visible and fluorescent green rental on it, sticker or something, so that people can see that's a rental versus a homeowner's.
Well, that's what we're kind of number one is about.
Yeah.
To put the name, an ID and a phone number.
Right, is there a way to change something, or, there's only so much we can require them to do, but change the color of the ID or something on a rental so that people can see it when it goes by.
I don't, and that's probably not a bad idea. I don't know that we already have the registration number, but that's gonna be on any vessel.
Yeah, that's on
Rental
everything.
or owner. Maybe they put a, green dot or something on it. I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
if
They
there's somebody who actually fills out the registration, it says it's rental, they have to add a sticker that says this is a rental, something, and it's, visible to people.
But the things we're trying to accomplish with the rental company name, if the rental company name is on the boat, that's identifying it as, right?
It's just harder to see,
I think the point is it may not, you might be,
Yeah,
you may not be able to read that, but if you had a sticker that just
Yeah,
said,
or
this
just
is a rental,
something that's
and you already have the FL
obvious.
number, using those
Yeah.
things, you could find out where it came from.
And that would, unless I'm missing something, that would be mostly applicable to those vessels who are rented in conjunction with a short-term rental, a single-family house.
Right,
And that way, we could tell if I'm on one that has a big sticker on the side
Right.
versus no, then I'm a renter. The guy next to me doesn't have one, he's an owner and he owns that vessel and he's operating out of his house.
I just think that might be
And we can make the sticker look really cool, like a big palm
Simple.
tree or something,
Yeah.
or a rocket.
maybe
going
just a
off.
little simpler way to
Okay.
identify.
So you wanna make that for number one and we'll consolidate that into the list?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. And then, I guess the next step is you're gonna translate this into, words and changes in LDC.
We like to call it an enabling
Enabling
language.
language, because
It goes in the land development code.
it does seem a little different than the normal language. The LDC mainly deals with structures and, design and things like this. This is like operating stuff on water. Seems a
It
little
is,
out of
but
the scope, but
We've gotten pretty good and no offense, we follow the attorney's, model and we look for existing language so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so. But we're not the only ones dealing with this,
Mhm.
so.
okay, that's it, thanks.
And it may well wind up in the code of ordinances rather than the land development code.
Yes, it
So
almost
just
seems.
so you're aware, right?
Yeah, it almost makes more sense to be in the ordinance maybe, but
Probably.
maybe, okay.
Schneider?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I think, Lisa, you mentioned at the last meeting that the canals are under the jurisdiction of the leisure services. Is that true? If that's true,
Well-
should we be involving them in this, or?
Because, almost just like I was saying, it just seems a little out of scope for what we would normally be looking at, structures and things like that. So I went and looked, is there another organization that's responsible for waterways? And it does identify the Leisure Activity Board, I don't know if that's the right name, but, as more language in their charter than
We
ours.
can
I think I can answer. So the Leisure Services Board is like an advisory board, like for
Yeah.
leisure services, but we're the board that actually does things like this, that work on, code and things like that. I don't think there's anything that Leisure Services is actually involved in this type of process. So and no one has technically jurisdiction. I mean, that's, it's not like there's a defined legal process that is supposed to go through them and then through us or anything like that.
And in reality, what we're talking about is more, my personal opinion is more applicable to the planning board because you're in charge of the code of ordinances, the land development code, and the text amendments there too. And really, when you look at it, we're talking about vessels, but vessels associated with real property and real property uses, real estate uses.
Okay.
So that's how we got involved in the noise ordinance and everything too, so.
What's the definition of short-term rental?
leased for longer than 30 days in a calendar year, at least twice. I believe, I'm trying to correct me,
So let me ask you another question then.
but again,
Why would we limit this to short-term rentals? Why wouldn't we say this is for rentals? In other words, if someone rents a house for a year, or 6 months, or 8 months, and they get on the boat and they don't know what they're doing, we're running the same risk, aren't we? So,
I don't believe this limits it to, I don't believe we're talking specifically limits it to short-term rentals.
Oh,
We're just
'cause
discussing in the context of short-term
all right,
rentals.
but we could include rentals, period.
well, again, if I'm doing a long-term lease, maybe I have a multi-year lease, I'm the permanent resident there. I know the waters, I know the vehicles. What we're really trying to concentrate on are those people who come in, I'm sorry, getting away from the microphone, who come in for a week and they wanna have the best time they can, not someone who's leasing for 6 months or more and is basically considered a permanent resident. They don't have to register that house, they have a lease, and it talks about what they can do, and they're responsible for their activities. And we know they're gonna be around, they're not gonna be, gone back to Iowa, after 7 days. So I would think that might, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, to be honest with you, but I will research it to see if we can move it to rentals, because then we're almost infringing upon somebody who has signed at least a year's, or 6 month, or at least a year's commitment to pay rent for this house and in exchange for quiet enjoyment. So, but again, I would have to get with the attorneys and we'll take a look at that. I feel a little uncomfortable with that right now, extending it to all rentals, so.
Well, I would think though, I think the goal though would be, is this would apply to me as well. I own my home.
Yeah.
I'm on a canal. Wouldn't this apply to me though, if all of a sudden I was like, hey guys, I'm gonna start up a boat rental business at my house, wouldn't I have to, provided whatever we come up with? It apply to me too, right? It's not that, you don't have to have a short-term rental to have this apply.
I'm not talking about a business where you're renting, I'm talking about you're renting your house and you have a year's lease and you happen to have a boat. Are you gonna have to put a sticker on that and register that any more than you would if you own the boat? You're the operator, you're the owner, you just happen to rent the house that has a dock. When we first got here, we had a boat, we first moved up from South Florida, we rented a house over in Merritt Island on a canal with a dock. We had a boat. And we treated it just like we owned the house, as long as we didn't, weren't doing anything more than the owner.
So you're saying the vessel's included as part of the lease for the house?
No, I own the boat.
Oh, you own the boat?
I own the boat, but I'm renting
Oh, well,
the
that's your
house, and it
personal,
has a dock on it.
yeah, so it's your personal vessel.
Right, yeah, as would
Gotcha.
most of these long-term rentals, they would be, I'm not gonna probably not lease you a house for a year and also, by the way, include the boat. I think
Yeah,
most of the problem is short-term rentals. If I'm leasing if I have a long-term lease, I'm renting that house for quiet enjoyment, it's not a party house, I'm not gonna have someone different in there, I'm gonna be there all year, I'm not changing people every week. Therefore, I think I should have the quiet enjoyment if I have a dock or waterfront, if I own a boat, not a rental boat, but it's a boat I own, I'm putting it behind my rental house for my enjoyment and my use.
Yeah, this wouldn't apply then.
No, that wouldn't
Situation
apply.
Oh,
But if the boat was owned by the house owner who's renting to you, would it apply?
in other words.
It's the same situation. The only difference is, instead of it being a week or 2 weeks, it's now 6 months that somebody's leasing. It's kind of the same situation.
I don't know, I'd have to check on it, yeah.
I don't, so
What I'm trying to say is it discriminatory. In other words, are we being discriminatory from a legal point of view by saying, okay, this only applies to 1 or 2 or 3 week rentals, but it doesn't apply to 6 month renters?
no, because legally there's a distinction between folks who have a lease and then folks who are holding out their residence as a short-term rental operation. And the city has a clear, there are a lot of good reasons to regulate the two differently. And I see what you're saying by, is it discriminatory? The only difference here is where, talking about the difference between 2 or 3 weeks and then 6 months or more. You can have a month-to-month lease in the state of Florida, and it doesn't even have to be in writing. So I see what you're saying there, but is it discriminatory to target this specific kind of rental apparatus, short-term rentals plus businesses that engage in this activity? No, not necessarily. Now, if we said, we're only gonna regulate boats over 26 feet, we're excluding boats under 26 feet, is that discriminatory? No, because there might be some additional interest in regulating the larger boats. Same thing here. You have a short-term rental, you have folks coming in and out every week, multiple families, multiple individuals every month. It's different than having one unit there for a longer term. I think we're trying to stop the kind of activity that comes along with those folks who aren't here for a long time, but for a good time, so to speak. That's the kind of activity that we're really looking to.
And again, along
Focus
those
on.
lines, remember, a short-term rental is considered a business.
Yes.
They have to have a BTR. If a long-term rental does not,
Okay,
so.
so there's a difference there.
Right.
Okay.
In my opinion, I'm not the attorney, but in my opinion, there is.
And my last question is, on number 8, that sentence, we might run into some Bert Harris claims, however, that makes me, I'm a nervous Nelly, and that makes me nervous.
Well, again, I think
What
we
are the
addressed that, it would
ramifications?
be.
We addressed that earlier.
Yeah, but I don't think he said, what are the ramifications if we run into a Bert Harris claim?
What we would, there's a process for a claimant initiating a Bert Harris action. It's very fact specific, so it's hard to sit here now and say, what exactly our liability would be. It's essentially, it's like a taking lawsuit, like an eminent domain lawsuit, but just a little less, because we're not taking the property, but they would allege something like, oh, well, you're restricting my ability to
Right.
hold out my property as a commercial, which we're not really taking away their right, we're just
We're only
regulating it.
this.
Yeah.
We're not banning, there's nothing in here that says you cannot do this. Well, I mean, at least we have,
But I understand
there's
what
some
you're
things we
saying.
were talking about here.
What you're saying is that, I can't Airbnb my house without the boat. I mean, I envision somebody saying that.
Yeah, but we're not prohibiting them from doing that. We're just requiring them to go ahead and take some additional
Still
steps.
very nervous about that. Okay.
Did you have any other questions?
Nope.
Mr. Chair, I have one other question that I just realized. In Becky's thing here, number 5 talks about operations from sunup to sundown, 7 days a week. But in the items that Mr. Tarver gave us, number 5 was about excessive noise, no wake violations will result in a 180-day suspension of all rental operations within the city of Cocoa Beach Canals. Can we do that?
I think that's why she took it out. I don't think we can do that.
Okay.
I don't know. I talked with her today about this. We didn't discuss that particularly, but I can follow up with her and get that
Sure.
answer for
I
you.
think that's more would fall under like the Airbnb escalating fines and stuff,
Mhm.
like that, I think that's more like.
Okay.
We just as an example, we are proposing as part of the short-term rental, relative to say noise ordinance, it would be considered after so many violations, a nuisance property. Once it is considered a nuisance property, then we have the ability to ask for additional, things, including deposits, make sure that, they have to sign an affidavit saying that they have covered this with the rental, whether it be the owner or whether it be the property manager, they have covered this with the neighbors. There are additional things that kick in once you've had 3, I think it's 3, maybe 4 violations, and the property itself is considered a nuisance property. So we might be able to build that in. Once you've had a violation relative to these new ordinances, that property is also considered a nuisance property, and the penalties apply to those people renting, in that the punitive part is they have to put up an additional deposit. I think it was like $1,000. So we could look at it along those lines for the repeat offenders, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a few, are you all set?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a few so actually, I think you answered a question I asked earlier was, I am a homeowner, I own, and I live in my home. If I decided like, hey, I'm gonna open up a boat rental operation at my home, this would apply because I would have to get a BTR with the city, because I'm opening a business, right?
Yes.
And then these and if these regulations were to be in place, I know they're not in place today, I would have to adhere to these regulations.
If you did that now, is that what you're
I'm
saying?
saying after this is done. Let's say all this goes into effect.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, and then so the next day I come in, I would have to I would, even though I'm a homeowner, I'm not running an Airbnb, I'm just decided, hey, I'm gonna start a boat rental company at my house, this would apply to me.
Would not the zoning laws prohibit that? This is residential property.
Yeah, that was my first thought.
Okay.
And we can, and you know, whether or not you're holding out your vessel to be used in the canals and you're renting it to someone you don't know for consideration, that would fall under the definition that we're looking at broadly. I don't know if that's exactly what's gonna be in the final draft. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you would technically fit within the definition of what we're looking at. I just don't know whether or not it's gonna be the will of, you know.
But to me, if you did it, if you just said, I'm gonna have a boat rental business behind my house, that is a business that, in my opinion, is not a permitted use in the R1 or residential zoning district.
Yeah,
So I think that's
that
gonna be
takes
our
care of
first
it.
line
Yeah,
of
I
defense
got you.
there. It's a little bit different than I'm looking at if I have a short-term rental and the person rents that and a vessel that goes with the house for a period of time.
Got it, okay. So the next question would be, so back to, number 8, sorry. So follow-up question to number 8. So it says we might run into some issues, so could we conceivably narrow the prohibition to a residential district, saying the RS 1 or 2 or whatever, you know, for our canal front homes, you cannot rent boats from your Airbnb? Would that work, would that make more sense or work better in our favor?
Are we, just from my own, are we talking about renting vessels from your short-term rental or with your short-term rental?
Either or, I guess. From what I understand that with some of these operations, they are renting the boats separately from the short-term rental and sometimes together. So,
Really?
yeah, the guy down my street's doing that.
See, I think that is a violation
Yeah,
of
that's a
our zoning
violation.
ordinance, because that is clearly a business.
Okay,
He probably doesn't have a BTR because we would not issue him one.
Yeah.
okay.
And that probably currently exists as a code enforcement issue that needs to be addressed.
So okay, that address that, but can we say short-term rental houses with boat rentals, I don't know how to say it, you know, you're not permitted to associate the boat rental with the house in the residential RS 1 or 2. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's already a prohibited use, correct? In a residential zone?
Yeah, as a business, I think.
I'm talking about with the
correct me,
short-term
Mr. Carver,
rental.
You're getting at it, you're trying to say, if you have a short-term rental, you cannot rent water vessels in conjunction with that short-term rental.
If you're in a particular residential zoning district.
Okay, RS1, correct?
RS1.
Okay, the thing I would, and again, I'm not the attorney, I don't even play one on TV, but if I have a waterfront home that I'm renting as a short-term rental and it has a dock, and I may have a boat sitting out there, that may begin to be, and again, don't let me get too far afield, that may begin to be their claim. I have resources that you are prohibiting my use in terms of renting my house as a short-term rental. I've registered it, I've registered the vessel, but now you're telling me I can't rent that to the occupants of that short-term rental? I don't know, it's a slippery slope, I feel.
That would get closer to a Bert Harris claim. Because what if their rental value goes down from $200 a night to $150? Is that a restriction that would rise to a claim? Maybe. So I think that's where Becky might have been going with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that what you're saying would apply to the ones who are currently doing this?
Oh, baby.
That are already doing it today? So we can't take it away from people doing it today.
But you could
But
restrict
going
it in the
forward.
future. Yes, that's
There-
correct.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so in the future, okay. So,
Yeah.
to sum this up, so we can, going into the future, not current owners, say you cannot rent a vessel motorized vessel from your Airbnb in RS1 zoning.
But again, as we said before, without that clear line that you can or you can't, now we create an enforcement issue because, well, I'm renting it, but I'm grandfathered. Well, if he can rent it, why can't I rent it? Well, you're not grandfathered, and we get into that back and forth battle. That's why I'm trying to draw the lines as clearly as we can, because even grandfathering as used in our land development code it creates some, I always tell people, we live in a world of gray. Very seldom is it black and white in the development business, and I'm just trying to avoid creating any more gray area. As long as we can regulate it and achieve a pretty good standard, I'm all for, if you're gonna have short-term rentals, and the state's told us we're going to have to, it's a concern if I'm renting a waterfront property and I have vessels that you're telling me I can't use. And I think, again, we would have to talk about whether or not that rises to the level. If I've got a property that rents for $700 a night and now I'm down to $500 a night, maybe that's, maybe that's a concern, because that's $1,400 a week you're taking from my potential revenue. And those are not outrageous numbers by any means.
Okay. So really what you're saying is we're probably going to, essentially it'll be allowed to rent vessels from a residential neighborhood, because we can't potentially say no, and we can't do a grandfather clause to say going forward, no, is what you're saying.
I think there's a difference between not being able to do something and maybe choosing not to do something in order to tailor the regulation to reach the end. So I see what you're saying. Can we do that in the future? I think yes. If they have no entitlement to that now, once the regulation's in effect, if they buy in, they wouldn't have any claim to be able to do that. But then, there's enforcement issues. What's grandfathered? To what extent is it grandfathered? The law there is very gray. Those are the toughest issues to deal with. So to avoid them would be, I think, better.
All right, I guess we avoided that. I know what you're saying, because like I said, I see this exactly like the Airbnbs. We only had a few, then we had a lot. I can see that this could easily become the same thing with the single-family homes that are Airbnb, that you tack on a boat rental operation. In my house alone, I could have, if I did that, I could have 3 boats behind my house that I could potentially, if I had an Airbnb, if I was operating Airbnb in my house, I could potentially have 3 boats running out of that house, because I have a 4-bedroom house potentially with 4 different couples. I could have 3 boats and potentially, that's why I'm trying to think this through.
But even as an owner-operator, if you do that, you're gonna lose your homestead exemption.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to think of, like, what has happened with Airbnbs. I firmly believe this is the next Airbnb with these boat rentals.
And there are gonna be people who look on Airbnb or VRBO or whatever for units specifically that have watercraft as part of the package. That's still a little different to me than a commercial venture where I can drive, park in a parking lot, or park in front of your house, and I'm not staying at your house at all. I'm gonna go back there and I'm gonna rent your boat.
No, essentially, yes.
That to me is an illegal use in the RS1 at this present time.
Yes. No, I'm saying UB in conjunction to the guests.
I understand.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying about the other stuff. So. Okay, well, I think, I have a pretty good grasp of all this, so thanks. I appreciate your clarification. So, I guess, a lot of notes.
Go make it enabling language and bring it back to you, right?
Yeah, so I think the only thing we're striking really is number 2. We can't do anything about that. That's the insurance, liability insurance being required to be in the state of Florida to avoid foreign carriers. We can't avoid that situation. That we have to just strike out, right?
It sounds like the Florida statute already has taken that into account.
Okay, so that's fair.
Well,
So
but I don't think we have to strike it out. I think as part of the regulation,
what already requires
the
it?
annual check.
It's
No,
already
they were required to, but as if we are regulating this as a business, then as
It's
part of
checked.
our annual check,
Yes.
we can verify that they carry that insurance,
Good
right?
point.
So
Good point.
we don't have to take it out. We can't supersede what Florida requires, but we can check that they're.
Well, it also
Well, that's
should be part
covered
of their,
already.
it should be part of their registration package.
Right, good
Part
point.
of the
No, you're
enabling
good point.
language would be pursuant to Florida statute 327, blah, 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 if the vessels must have the following types of insurance.
Yeah.
And it's already included, but it can still be part of the enabling language, the regulatory language.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're pretty good then at this point, it sounds like, with what she suggested, with some minor changes, it sounds like. Okay, cool. And then, so you guys have, I think you all both have a few additional things you'd
I'll
like to.
type up windows and I'll email it to.
Is that okay?
Do you want this or you want me to?
Yeah,
We'll
please
type
do.
it up.
Thank you.
Or you want to email it, it's up to
I'll
you.
type it up.
No
Okay.
one will
Want me
read
to
this, I
do-
promise you.
Okay.
I'm
so
gonna have
you want-
part of that time, Mr. Armenteros interpreting my notes.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's good, so thank you all for your input. I did have one follow-up question, since the city attorney is here. Well, actually, we should do is, sorry, I should wait till board comments, that would be the right process to go through. So, do we need to ask for public comment again after all the discussion we had, or not? Does anyone, did you have any public comment after we discussed all this?
I've got one thing I can bring up. I don't know.
Sure, just state your name and address.
Yeah, my name's Joe Clark, 1750 Commodore Boulevard. I know the city, believe the city's already engaged a third party to look for unregistered vacation rentals.
Yes.
This, I believe, would tie right into that, in that the watercraft registration is part of an amenity of vacation rental. I see how that all ties together. And then there's additional fees for registering the watercraft, so.
Is that, I don't know, Randy, have anything?
I don't know if that helps or not.
No, that's fine. We have pro champs. We've been having a little trouble on the finalization of this effort. We are scheduled by them to be up and running before October 1. And I'll just be open and honest, if that is not the case, we have a meeting next week with a second company. But you're right, as part of that, we would ask them to look for any advertisements on any of the websites advertising watercraft as part of the package.
Okay. Okay, awesome. All right, okay, so I think that covers B, so there's nothing for new business. Is there any staff or city attorney reports?
Just, if I might, we'll just bring you up to speed on a few things. Obviously, you've seen 99 and 66 where they've torn the buildings down. The demolition is complete. They're going to join those two parcels together, and construction should begin probably sometime in the fall. I know we're in the fall, but later in the fall. This is a company. We are looking at some programs now, believe it or not, for the old Glass Bank building, just to kind of bring you up to speed there. Don't have anything definitive other than some what we know. The Yin Yin property is being slated for a 45-foot tall structured garage facility. The pier is moving forward. As you know, they're looking to put the resort up there, and we have answered some questions for Driftwood on the Weston property. Don't have a time frame from them yet. I know everybody's struggling with financing right now, but.
Well, didn't they just get sued?
I'm sorry?
Or the county got sued? I thought someone sued someone
I
for $30
think
million.
there is a lawsuit, as a result of the $30 million from
But
the
that's not, I guess
TDC.
that's against the
That's
county
the
though,
pier.
right? So,
It's the county.
yeah, okay, never mind. So that wouldn't, well,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
But other than that, anything you want to know, please, call Christy or I, and we'll be happy to bring you up to speed on the latest. Any questions on development in general or what we're doing?
What about the surf? It looks like there's some activity from Bernard Surf is now have some
Again,
construction
we've got
going
the
on, or is
tavern
that
at
for
the back,
next surf?
right, the tavern on the west end. What they're doing now is they're putting in, believe it or not, I call it AstroTurf. It's a synthetic turf that will help with the drainage there. The intent is to do a
Container, is it still container?
mixed-use development with office, restaurant, and some outdoor activities, but this is to help, the drainage and to stabilize that there. That's what's going on.
That's what's going on now.
Does anyone else have any questions
That's the
for?
rain that you hear.
We may have to eat dinner here. I
The
don't know.
golf course will be closed again tomorrow.
That's all I have unless you have any more questions.
General public comments? Okay, board final comments. So I'll start at this end this time, since I started over here last time.
No comments from the speaker.
I'm very excited about this whole thing with the boats and I think it's fabulous and I hope we can work it out and send it through.
Hopefully we can actually get in front of something.
And it sounds like it's needed, or there's an interest, we got several comments on that submitted, so that usually is a sign that it's something that people are looking for.
I know these folks well, and I can tell you it
So-
was an utter nightmare, like what was going on with wildlife motorsports. It was, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. Except for maybe all the Airbnbs
But
that have come
no
through.
other, yeah. I have no other comments, thanks.
I have a comment, but I'll let everyone else go first before I have a
No
comment.
further comments.
I'm good.
Okay,
Can
I
I
did have a question for the city attorney. So, a separate topic, another new and emerging concept is Swimply, to where you can,
Right in your swimming pool.
is there any way to get ahead of that, or do I dare ask if we can get ahead of that, or not?
There is. We had this issue pop up in another one of our cities down south. So we've looked at it, and then I can forward this on to Becky, then I'll
Okay.
have her.
Do you think by the next meeting, we maybe could have at least a brief provided to us?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, because as you see, my theme is to get ahead of things, and I believe that will be an emerging thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It just never ends. I wish I could rent out, you just rent out anything nowadays, can't you? You just rent anything out these days, you know, and it's like. All right, well, so thank you all, thank you for working on all this,